All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from lunch to the next panel, which I think is on a very timely and a very relevant topic. We're going to switch gears a little bit. We heard about the military and kind of the defense challenges this morning. We're now going to shift gears and talk about the non-military challenges. The title of this panel is The Attraction of the Putin Model: How Does Russia Inspire Authoritarianism Abroad? And we have an excellent panel to address this topic. Let me just say a few words to just frame the issue, and then we'll move from there. So, during his presidential address to the Federal Assembly in Russia in December 2013, Putin outlined a vision. He presented the EU and the West, more generally, as decadent places where traditions and values are eroding. Putin's outlook is very appealing, especially to far-right European leaders. And they have expressed support for and cultural affinity with the Russian leader. But he's also appealing to left-wing leaders in Europe who see Russia and Putin as a challenge to the US-led hegemonic order in Europe. So Russia has become, on the one hand, more authoritarian at home, but also more aggressive abroad, especially when it comes to promoting its soft power in Europe and more broadly. Perhaps one could even borrow Joe Nye's term about smart power to describe what Russia is doing, combining hard military power with soft power, like information warfare, propaganda, funding to political movements, so on and so forth. So, what are the basics of the Putin model? How does Russia inspire authoritarianism in Europe and beyond? How effective is Russia in doing this? And how can the West respond to these challenges? These are the topics for this panel. I'm going to introduce the keynote speaker, and then I'm going to introduce the two other panelists. Keynote speaker is Ambassador Andras Shimony, who's a dear friend. Andras is the managing director for the Center for Transatlantic Relations at Johns Hopkins. He is a former Hungarian ambassador to NATO and to the United States. And by the way, he was very instrumental in negotiating Hungary's accession to NATO. So if Sweden at one point will decide to go down that route, he would be a good person to talk to. Andras has also appeared on the Colbert Show in the US, also plays in a rock band. In addition to Andras, we have Magnus Christiansson, who's an associate lecturer at the Department of Strategy at the Swedish Defense University, focusing on transatlantic security and security and risks in the Baltic Sea region. And then we also have Karolina Wendel-Pahlin, who's the Deputy Research Director at the Swedish Defense Research Agency, or FOE. She heads the research program on Russia, and she has a PhD from the London School of Economics, and has previously worked as a senior research fellow at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Ambassador Shimony to give the keynote remarks.
Don't clap just yet. I mean, you don't know what you will get. Yeah, I play in a rock band. It's called the Coalition of the Willing. And our drummer is the Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Sandy Vershbow. Wow. That's pretty cool. We have a real guitarist from Steely Dan, Skunk Becks are also playing. So, you know, this is probably the worst slot in any conference. You've had a great lunch, you had a long morning, you come back and you're ready to fall asleep. And having played in a rock band, what we need to do, Eric, is to make this panel so good that people will lie about having been here. Let me just, you know, Tom Lantosh, who was a dear friend of mine, the late Congressman Tom Lantosh, who was a great friend of the North. He used to start his speech by saying, "I know what is expected of me. I don't know how to make it interesting." And I you know, that's a pretty big challenge. I'm a great friend of the North. I'm really, you know, I don't think you can get closer to being a Nordic unless you're born and raised here. I went to school in Denmark, and so I really know how close Denmark and Sweden is. Let me tell you an anecdote to illustrate. A year ago, I arrived to Stockholm, and I got on the bus. And my Danish is pretty good, so I got on the bus and went to the bus driver and said, explained in beautiful Danish, "Sir, I'd like to go to the hotel. Would you please tell me how I can get there?" And he looked at me and said, "Sir, that was beautiful. Can you repeat it in English?" That's how close Denmark and Sweden is. I'll get there. Yeah, I'll get there in a minute because there is an issue here between Denmark and Sweden at this moment, which I'd like to discuss with you. I'd like to build upon what has been said earlier. I'd like to state where I think we are with Russia. First of all, something that I keep repeating, and I think as a result of the conversations this morning, I can repeat it again. Russia has a leader who understands only the language of the baseball bat. Please understand that sophistication and weary-eyed dreams of a new dialogue with Russia is not gonna do the trick. So this is the first thing I'd like to say. The second thing I'd like to say is that Russia is a lot more strategic than we are kidding ourselves. It's not true that that Putin is only tactical. He's pretty strategic. He knows where he wants to go, and his ultimate goal at this moment is to disrupt the Western model, disrupt Europe, disrupt the unfinished process of transition in Central Eastern Europe, keep the north of Europe on its toes, keep teasing the Finns and the Swedes, intrude into Western Europe through all kind of means. Let me immediately get to what I think is happening. Eric spoke about hard power and soft power, and then Joe Nye is talking about smart power. Let's put that aside. We have invented a totally different phrase. We call it spectral power, because at the end of the day, it's just power. And I think what we are not understanding is that the Russians are a lot more sophisticated in building their power toolbox than we have so far admitted to ourselves. And the reason being, and don't fall asleep, because now comes the interesting part, we have been focusing on the hard power aspects, yes, but trust me, at this moment, the toolbox of interruption, at this moment, if you want, the softer aspects of the spectrum are becoming far more dangerous for Europe than the military threats that we face. I'm not saying that it's not part of their thinking, but I think the idea that Russia can interrupt Europe, can divide Europe, can design a tool or a set of tools for each and every individual country. I think that is what's happening. Let me also say that I was, I think there's something. Well, first of all, Yuri and I are relatives. We're both Finno-Ugrians. We kind of there's in our genetic code to kind of be close to each other. He's an old friend and colleague. And I agree, I don't hate the Russians. On my wall in my office, there are two pictures. One is November 1956, when the Russians invaded Budapest. It's the November 3rd issue of the Baltimore Sun, where the Russian tanks roll into Hungary and crush the revolution. That's one picture. On the other wall, there is a picture of me standing with Yuri Gagarin, which is pretty cool. And it reminds me the two sides, the two aspects of Russia, where Russia is and what Russian power is, and where Russia could be if it were a normal country that would not allow its best of the best to flee, to establish companies like Google, instead of doing it in Russia. The problem is that side of Russia I just don't see. I just don't see it. What I do see is that Russia is getting increasingly aggressive militarily as the Russian economy is going down. Nobody spoke about the Russian economy, but I think it's really important to understand that, and here I get to the point, the attractiveness of the Russian model was there until the oil prices were about 140, maybe 100, even at 80. The attraction of Russia as a viable model is losing steam, because there is more and more understanding that Russia is a dying country, is a collapsing economy, with the exception of one sector, which is the military-industrial sector. And here lies the problem. We have not understood the essence of the Russian system, which will keep it going, is that it has to, there is a saying about Chekhov, if there is a gun hanging on the wall in the first scene of the drama, that weapon at one moment, at a certain moment in time during the play, will be fired. And that's really what we need to keep in mind. Let me get to the core of it. I do feel that Russia has made a lot more inroads into our societies than we dare to admit. Let me just give you some examples. Take, for example, energy security. What are we doing? What are we doing? What have we allowed Russia to do in the last 20 years? Why have we not been able to design a more independent European energy policy? Why have we allowed Russia to basically take a number of Central Eastern European countries hostage because of their energy dependence? You know, energy in Russia, as the Lithuanian energy minister said recently, it's never only energy. It's always strategic and it's politics. And I do believe that, I'm glad Yuri mentioned Nord Stream 2, the ultimate and the next step where we're going to make a huge strategic mistake if we allow Nord Stream 2 to happen. But by the way, Nord Stream 2 and the way Germany is looking at Nord Stream 2 bring us to a totally different issue. To what extent have the Russians already intruded upon our elites? Not just the Hungarian elite, not just the Slovak elite, not just the Czech elite, not just the Croatian elite, not just the Austrian elite, but the German elite as well. And that is really a problem we are facing. I don't know about Sweden, but my guess is that as we speak today, there is another conference happening in Moscow that is discussing how are we going to intrude further upon the Swedish elites. This brings me to the next issue, which is the refugee crisis. Eric and I, we wrote a piece very early on in which we suggested, it's maybe 2 months ago, which is really early in the crisis, where we basically suggested that we shouldn't be surprised when we one day find out that the Russians had something to do with the refugee crisis. I'm not saying that they have caused it. I'm not saying they have instigated it. But as Putin is an opportunist, I'm absolutely clear that Putin has grabbed the opportunity, and his agencies, his forces are actually helping to push the refugees in this direction. Why? Because Putin's ultimate goal is to disrupt our societies, and that's exactly what is happening. How many minutes do I have? 5 minutes. I want to say that, I was going to start by saying that I'm an early, steadfast proponent of Swedish membership in NATO. So I just don't want to, mince my words. Sweden should have joined NATO a long time ago. There are many reasons for that, and I believe that those who have suggested you could have joined easily in peacetime, it will be a lot more difficult to join when crisis breaks out. I would say that I belong to those that Sweden is ready when it wants to be ready. I think it's a political decision. It's your decision. We are not going to push you in that direction. But please understand, this is not just about defense. It's about where Sweden, where the Nordic countries see themselves in the future. What is their vision of their role in the future in the world? Do you want to be a country that makes a difference, that can help change things, that has a huge influence, that has a big saying in things that is happening across the Atlantic, or don't you? Why stay 8 months pregnant forever? Because that's what you're doing. You're paying a huge price, a very high price for being where you are. Will that, in the end, give you the protection that NATO would? No. Would that give you the influence, the impact that you really want as a nation? No. So I just want to say, I personally think the Nordic countries have a hugely important role to play in revitalizing the transatlantic community, in revitalizing Europe. And I would like to see all of the Nordic countries be members of both NATO and the European Union. And whether Finland comes first or Sweden comes first, I really don't want to get into that debate. I don't care. I would finally like to say that, just a final word. I was totally blown away by this article in Dagens Nyheter yesterday. I really enjoyed reading it. Wow. So 2 young journalists from Sweden got the opportunity to interview himself, Mr. Snowden, in Moscow. That's a big deal. The problem is that I think he's a spy. I think he was a Russian-trained setup. I don't believe he's a good person who has helped us. Maybe inadvertently he has helped us reshape the way we look at our surveillance and the way we do business. But for heaven's sake, he has been the most damaging person for our community. And I keep asking myself, look, we Eastern Europeans, we kind of thrive on conspiracy theories. Like I'm almost certain this RT guy who was shot in Washington died 2 days ago was probably the work of Mr. Putin. I mean, we thrive on these ideas. But I don't think I'm wrong when I say that Mr. Snowden has done a greater favor to Russian soft power in its effort to disrupt our societies than any person I know. So I would like to stop here on a not very funny and a not very optimistic note, saying that I do believe Sweden has strong institutions. It has a strong and viable democracy. It has very smart people. It has the ability to reinvent itself. You got to do it. Don't do our enemies the favor to allow the refugee crisis to disrupt your societies, because if your society is disrupted by the refugee crisis, then the rest of Europe will suffer. You were going to be the poster child of how you handle this. Right now you're stuck. But I think it takes real leadership, real courage, and please do this favor to your friends. I'll conclude by saying the question that I most frequently get these days in the United States is not about TTIP. It's not about, it's not about NATO enlargement. What the hell are you guys doing with this refugee crisis? I'll stop here, and I'm looking forward to a good debate.
Thank you, Anders. And now I would Now I would like to welcome the rest of our panel. Carolina and Magnus, please join us on the stage. And I believe, Kara, you're going to go first, addressing what makes the Russian model so attractive. Please.
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to extend a thank you to the organizers for including this topic on the panel, because it highlights a perspective that I, together with my colleagues at the Swedish Defence Research Agency, often stress when we give talks. And it's the fact that we have to take on board that this is not just a geopolitical challenge, it's an ideological challenge as well. And I think this was highlighted in Mr. Ambassador's talk, and it was also highlighted by Charlie earlier on, that we need to look at this as a broad security challenge. So in my comments, I'll start by talking about why the Russian model is attractive to Russia, or to the Russian political leadership, because I think you need that as a background to understand the model as such. I'll then just very briefly talk about what elements I think are attractive to other countries and elites. And finally, I'll talk about the limits of the attractiveness, because sometimes I think we overemphasize the power of Russia, and we should also be looking at the weaknesses that are actually there. So just to start off then, I mean, few, if any, countries say that they want to export an authoritarian model. Indeed, Russia doesn't claim that it's authoritarian. Rather, Russia will say that Russia has an exceptional culture and history and experience, and you need to take that on board. They can't copy the Western experience, and so they have to find their own sovereign path.